Hi, all. So, this channel and its purpose right now, it's a dump for videos that I want to be putting more exclusively into the setting of a document, which will be a document about our tradition in our school. And while doing that, I want to put material out there so that eventually people can correspond and they can also make a connection between the videos on the channel and the work that will come out at some point. And it will be very practical. It's just that before you make something that really works properly, you have to lay a foundation for that thing. And the reason I created my own system in the first place is because after studying for many, many years, I saw things that were not being addressed. And I also thought I could do them better. Um, with that said, for this evening, I want to talk about mistakes people make in the understanding of distance. And again, distance is one of the three pillars: distance, intent, and timing. Okay? If you don't have those elements in cue, then your movement, your technique, and your approach is lacking. Okay? So, very important understanding. And there are certain rules of thumb that apply. In this case, with distance, it's very important to make a distinction between a static situation where you're demonstrating a technique and a situation that is chaotic, where certain processes come online that you can really not mimic in a demo. Okay? So, with that said, when you are attacked by multiple opponents, you have to think this through and you have to use your common sense. Okay? Two things people do here that's a mistake. The first is to simply say, well, there's nothing you can do. I can get in the ring and beat somebody up and punch somebody in the face in the bar if they look at my girlfriend the wrong way and choke them out. But if it's two or three guys, or if they have a knife, that's it. Well, really? I mean, okay, but you might find yourself in a situation where you're betting against yourself and, you know, there are things you can do. So let's look at equalizers in that situation, okay? The first equalizer would be a weapon, okay? If you know how to use a weapon properly, especially a bladed weapon, even though it's not a weapon of length, you will create certain conditions within that context that will allow you some more possibilities, okay? So weapons are basically equalizers many times, okay? The aspect of dueling with a weapon is not fundamental to the use of weapons. But if you have five guys catch you in an alley and you know how to use a knife, you can really even those odds very well if you understand a few other things, okay? So that attitude, it has to go out the window. Timing as well. You really have to train and understand and be able to prompt yourself. But if you know what motivates you and you can really do it and you train with it and you work up to it in hypothetical situations where you pressure test it, you have two or three people at you. If you can take the first person out, it is a successful strategy. It's not easy to do. Most people are hopelessly defensive in a situation like that. But If you really train and you can hit that guy in the throat and drop him, you have a big advantage at that point. Okay? So, that attitude, again, let's throw that out the window. The other attitude is, oh, it's easy. You just do this, you just line them up, and you knock them down. You see a little bit of this in the Bujinkan. That is also a fallacy. The biggest problem in a situation like that, if you've ever had three people come at you to take your head off, and I have, we did that as training, and I've been in situations like that where I grew up. And the biggest problem is your options get cut off pretty quickly if you don't know what to do. Okay? Now, a lot of the options that people talk about with distancing, they are minor concessions and they don't allow you to really do something that is monumental in that situation. Okay? I gave you two things which everybody talks about just now, but let's talk about some of those things. So we talked about them in another video where I had my sons here, but going to the flanks, it's a great thing to do. It buys you a little bit, getting away, backing up. But no matter how fast you are backing up, you can't go faster than somebody going forwards. So you got to keep that in mind as well. And that'll buy you minimal time, okay? So the problem is, if you're fighting one person, you have your center line and their center line. And you can attack their center line. You can have visibility on what they're doing at all times if we're in a ring. And it's a matter of skill, yada, yada. But when you're in a situation where you don't know how many people you're fighting, okay, you lose that ability. So you have to adjust your strategy and the movements that you use. But to what end? Okay? And this is one of the reasons I created my own system. Nobody seems to understand that. When somebody pursues you and they are the aggressor and they have the confidence, maybe it's a person with a knife coming at you just very aggressively and they just keep coming forwards, and you've seen this, there are videos out. Lo and behold, all these people who know stuff, they just crumble, okay? The problem is the same with multiple opponents. You have to sometimes readjust their approach so that they cannot attack you directly, that they have to change course with what they're doing, okay? Now, obviously, if you're trying to do this with subtle footwork, it's not going to be enough. So what do? You have to learn how to move in Aikido circles, more or less. And I know I always say that to deliberately get people's ire up, but I do want to give a lot of love and respect to Ronald Duncan and Richard Wigginton, who taught this technique as part of their training. And I was taught this through Richard Wigginton, who was a student of Ronald Duncan's The Way of the Winds. This circular movement, and there's a video which is about multiple opponents on the channel, you can watch it. What it does, it makes your opponent have to readjust their course of action to continue their attack. Okay? And you don't have to put a lot of effort into it. You don't have to set anything elaborate up. You can be doing other things while you make the movement. Okay? This is a very important concept. People tend to get in a box. I have to do technique. I have to do this. I have to do that. But there will be spaces in between where you don't necessarily freeze up, but you want your body to reflexively do the right thing to allow you to fight into technique. Okay? So by totally making a circular movement, you make them have to change their direction very coarsely. Okay, we're not talking about a matter of inches or with subtlety. We're talking about they're chasing you down and they're going forwards because you have to go back in this case. When you make that circular movement towards them with a full circle, they have to now change what they're doing to get to you. Okay? You can do this movement perpetually in a situation where you're doing other things, while you're drawing weapons, while you're trying to pick opponents off. You finally get your dander, whatever the case may be, so you can attack. So you do the movement, you attack one person. Boom. Okay? You do the movement, you can attack, and it doesn't take a lot of energy or effort. Okay? So this is an example of how to realistically approach multiple opponents or even somebody with a knife. Okay? And it all has to do with understanding distance properly. Okay? And understanding that whenever you're working with distance, even in close, you generally want to put yourself in a position where they have to readjust to get to you. So even when we're fighting in close or something, your footwork is such that once I've hitting you or I've come into you, I'm not standing in front of you. I'm off to a point where for you to attack me, you have to do something with your body. However, that can be very subtle if it's a one-on-one situation or even with a weapon if you know what you're doing. However, with multiple opponents, you cannot make that subtle. You can still, the movement will get you into situations where people are stacked and you can push them down. It happens. The movement is such that you can take an arm and do things without compromising yourself. But the important thing is to understand what to work with at what distance, okay? And not to get into all these prejudices that people have because they're not doing that. You know, they're looking at things like there's one size solution for all. And we're talking really about distance here. So I want to encourage you to look at that video when you have a chance with multiple opponents. And I want you to think about how that affects your distance. And then when we get into some more subtleties, look at the concept, because the concept is the same. Even if you're attacking one-on-one, when I come into your center, I'm going to be off at an angle with my footwork so that for you to grab me, hit me, you have to make an adjustment. And that is a fundamental point to consider about distance when you're fighting. You don't get that fighting in a ring because it's a different situation. Doesn't mean it's wrong to fight in a ring. When you're younger, you should do that. I fought many, many years, and it has other things that it teaches you. However, when you're refining your technique and you want to work in self-defense, self-protection in a situation which is potentially life-threatening, you have to understand these skills because people move too fast. And if you're not anticipating, you're boxing, you're thinking, what I might get hit with a jab, I might get hit with a cross, but you're in a situation you don't know what the person will do. You're creating distance, but you might not be able to maintain it. There might be more than one person. You have to work reflexively and naturally with respect to your distance from your opponent. And you have to understand certain things apply at certain distances. Another example of this is if we are right face to face, sword length, which is 3 feet or less, maybe a little more, there's a certain parameter about what things will affect you. I can be subtle about certain things. If you're throwing a long range punch, I can make a small movement and get you to glide past me with the punch, okay? However, if we're 5 or 6 feet away and you're coming charging me with that punch, me making a small movement is just going to put me right in front of you and I'm going to get mowed down. Okay? Again, what applies regarding distance in that situation? What changes, right? If I have a weapon of length and I create distance and you have a sword, you can see it a little bit more clearly, which is why the Koryu in Japan look the way that they do. A lot of the training in the different ryuha is based on understanding the distance associated with the weapons that you're using. Okay? Makes perfect sense, right? So, in close, certain movements apply. Back farther, certain movements apply. Your vision picks up certain things at certain distances. Your peripheral vision becomes more important in certain cases when you can bring it online in a situation. You tend to be tunnel vision at first. However, if you're trained, you can bring your peripheral vision back online fairly quickly. And that applies, as opposed to looking directly at where you don't see movement as well. So I think we've accomplished our purpose with this video, which is to just get people to understand the importance of doing proper training in distance, in proper movements associated with different fighting distances, and doing distances reflexively so that you don't have to really think or reason it out. It's second nature to you. Once you train in the movement, the technique will follow. People do it backwards. Another reason why I created my own system. You don't train in technique first. You train in the proper movement and distance, okay? And the technique will come from that, okay? If you try to apply technique, you're working backwards, essentially. It's too slow. Brings up an important point. One of the fundamental differences between sport, martial arts, and self-preservation is on any sort of a sport scenario, you're gaining position first, okay? Even a good boxer basically sets his shots up, okay? In the street, you can't do that. It's too slow. You have to use a temewaza and kazushi, okay? You have to hit something really hard and destructively or take their balance immediately. So it's a different set of circumstances entirely, okay? And habitually, training for one will really make you weak for the other, unfortunately. If I'm trying to set somebody up for a rear naked choke, it's too slow, okay? Maybe if I'm fighting one person and I know that and I have the position, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can work with that way. However, in a sudden situation where chaos reigns supreme and you don't know how many people you're fighting, yada, yada, you're going to be lagging behind with that approach. Okay, when somebody picks up a pool cue and starts swinging and chasing you around, you can't try to get position first. Okay? So these are things to think about with distance.